So on to the meeting proper. Agenda: apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Firstly, I've had apologies from Andy Todd and Maxine Squire. Are there any other apologies? No. Good. Has anybody got any declarations of interest? Fantastic. Okay, so we now move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Firstly, does anyone have any concerns around accuracy of those minutes? No, thank you. Lovely. The second thing was, does anyone have any thoughts about matters arising from those minutes? Councillor Knight.
Just a quick one. Unless I've missed it, we were going to get a programme of school visits. Did that actually get produced, or are we not there yet?
We are not there yet, so that is something ongoing. My view is that we would sort of build that up over this year, and we've not got one. Anybody else? Any other things? One thing that, well, there's a couple of things that I wanted to raise. At the last meeting, we talked about the website not being updated. That has now been done. I've seen that, and hiya.
There's a Volkswagen up with the lights on.
Volkswagen up with the lights on. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
Okay, that's gone well. See, we're in the community and they like us already. So what was I saying? Oh yes, the website has been updated, so that's one thing that was mentioned in the minutes that needed doing. Another thing was myself and Councillor Rowley and Ben had agreed, Ben in your absence, I agreed for you, that we would help RAG rate the development plan. A date has now been set for that. We've not done it yet, but we have set a date. And so that will be something we can talk about at the next meeting. So if you could put that as an action to sort of discuss that at the next meeting. Finally, I've written survey. How's that gone out? I think that was a question for Maxine.
So it's gone out. She just needs to analyse the results, which will be presented at the next meeting.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay.
Sorry, Chair. There was just one thing. I don't want to sound like I'm nitpicking because I'm genuinely not. I really am not. So I'm all for going out into the community and visiting venues and being involved. I'm absolutely all for that. But I did say at the last meeting that, you know, we need to make sure that there is good quality Wi-Fi, that our IT people can sign up and agree that it's secure and it's right, because we do webcast these meetings. A, there's no mention of it in the minutes. And B, obviously, I think it's really important as we go out and about that any venue that we go to does have that facility. So it was just,
yeah, I think it's a good point to raise.
It's not nitpicking, Chair.
Well, I'll tell you what I thought you were going to say that you haven't raised. It was in the minutes previously about people sort of different religious denominations being identified within the attendance, and that was something you raised last time.
I did.
Picked up on it.
I did.
On the connections, Wi-Fi, things like that. Firstly, this meeting isn't webcast. It's not a live webcast meeting. It is recorded and then it will be uploaded at a later point. You're currently being audio recorded. We think we're also being recorded visually. We believe so. So that is happening.
It was in the minutes. That was all.
Yeah. Okay.
I wasn't questioning this. I was just
no, but
it's not in the minutes.
Thank you, and thank you for Ben for working on that and sorting that out.
Mainly Richard that we've got to thank for that.
Well, it's all important stuff. Penny?
I was just going to say that like we had a bit of back and forth about whether we could do this or not do this, but it is not a legal requirement for SACRE to broadcast.
Yeah.
I would like that meted because I don't want to limit us in where we can go. So it's not a legal requirement that SACRE is broadcast live.
Yeah, no, and financially speaking, I don't think it's something that we can achieve if we're going to other venues, which was why part of the decision was if we're moving to other venues, that's great. And actually, we've seen the benefit of it already tonight. But part of the caveat of that was it won't then be webcast. I think that'd be something that happened anyway. Any other matters arising from our last meeting?
Chair, did we deal with any of this point?
Okay, move on to the next item then, which is the annual reports. Now, you will know, obviously, Maxine Squire isn't here. The way this annual report is put together is Maxine essentially drew out all of the relevant information from a template. I have put forward on the front of this report, and in that you can see a range of what's going on in the city. My view is obviously I will open it up to questions, open it up to discussion now. If it is anything absolutely technical about the report, obviously Maxine isn't here. She is the person who wrote the report, so we'll make note of it and we'll email around any technical answers. But hopefully, if there's anything that people want to raise, we can have a general discussion on that item. So, annual reports. Anyone got any thoughts or feelings?
I'll kick us off. Just looking, I was just interested by the results, the exam results, and this may be something that needs to be looked up, but I'd just be interested. I noticed that the highest achieving groups were Indian Asian heritage and those young people with English as a second language. And I'd just like to know how that compares with other subjects, because it'd be interesting to know whether there is a correlation between that, the choice of doing RE at GCSE and A level and the attainment. I think that'd be a useful thing to understand.
Yeah, actually, yeah, because I think from I don't know if any other teachers in the room want to think about that, but from my perspective, those particular subgroups typically do very, very well across the board. But actually, we're looking at young people who've specifically chosen RE. Is there a link? I think.
I think that would just be interesting to understand.
I think that there's probably a table of data that we could probably share around the organisation. I'll go back to Maxine with that. Anyone else? Any other thoughts about the annual report? I mean, it's from stuff that happened last year before I was even chair, so it's kind of on you guys, you know. Okay. Is everybody happy to approve the annual report? Let's see a show of hands now. Brilliant. Right, thank you. That is formally approved. Okay. And I'll make a note of comparing attainments of subgroups, subjects. Brilliant. Okay. So now we move on to the next item on the agenda. Is find the right page. Monitoring of standards. So page 17 and 18. That's normally the Ofsted report. And we got anything they'd like to say about this particular item? And I'll jump at once, guys. It's fine. Sarah first.
I know we're going to come back to the conversations that we've had with young people, but I think a lot of the things that they were mentioning is reflected in this and sort of experience of RE lessons. So it's quite useful to think of them both together. I think.
Nice point, actually, Sue.
And I was just going to add that, bearing in mind everything that Ofsted's saying, if we look at the annual report that shows that the students in York did better statistically than nationally, I think there's clearly some schools really getting it right in York, and I think it's good to recognise that.
Yeah. It's hugely important, isn't it? Because I mean, I read this page and thought, wow, that's a bit damning, isn't it, really? But I do think that, since I was surprised actually tonight, and I suppose with the young people who sort of come along here, it's a selecting group, I suppose, but everyone was quite complimentary about RE. They suggested changes and things that could change, but there was nobody who came along and said, actually, RE is failing in its purpose or something like that, which is good. Whether that will be reflective of the wider community would be something that I think we'd love to explore. Martin?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting because I was on the last school visit that we did, myself and a couple of others. If you were on that, forgive me. And we went to Ralph Butterfield School, and the report back to SACRE was brilliant. I mean, they were fantastic, outstanding. And so, to my knowledge, that's the only school that we visited as a SACRE, and it seems to book the trend. So when I read this, I was quite surprised because I thought, wow, we've seen one school, but is it just that one school that's doing it? Which makes me think that actually, whilst that visit was excellent in terms of what we saw, this report would indicate that we need to do far more of those visits, so that we can, and also where we're able to maybe look at some of the best practice that we picked up from other visits. So that would be my comments on that.
So I'm struggling. It does sort of again relate back to what Cleo was saying, but also here there is the function of teaching children to pass the RE exam, and there is the function in RE, perhaps in a way that there isn't in other subjects, of preparing them, the pupils, for taking their role in a multicultural, multi-religious life. And I think those two functions are different, and I'm not certain that we're necessarily helping schools to think that through. I'm struck by the comment here, which related to what my son was saying, that RE, which isn't examined, is not well taught. And I thought the pupils today were giving us some good guidance on what that might look like. But I think we really could help the schools think through how they use RE and distinguish between those two roles. I think some more advice.
Thank you. Martin, on the school visit, obviously I've not been on one of those school visits. What describe a little bit about how many of you went, what did you do?
So there were three of us, myself, Ian Cuthbertson, obviously, who's retired, and I think Maxine came as well. So Maxine kind of led the visit, being the fact that that's her kind of role, really. We sat down with the RE lead, and he was able to go through with us exactly what he does, how he fulfills the curriculum, how he engages with the staff. It's a primary school, so it's slightly different from how you would engage with staff in a secondary school. There was a lot of evidence based around what they do and how they do it. What I was very impressed with was that it was very clearly multi-faith. Where I think one of the kind of the cop-outs and with RE generally is that if you're in a C of E school, C of E becomes the focus of what your RE is. It's you tick a box, you do an assembly, you sing whatever. But what I liked about the visit to Ralph Butterfield is it was very clearly across the curriculum and across all faiths. We then spoke to the head teacher, who gave us, all the support that the RE lead needed. We then went and observed lessons, spoke to the young people who weren't kind of pre-selected. We were able to, we had literally had carte blanche to chat with whoever we wanted to chat to in a very safe environment, obviously. And so that kind of framework that Maxine would have for any future visits, because there's a framework behind it, I think would be really useful. And I think, it's easy for us to say at a meeting like this, oh yeah, that's really good, let's do it again. We really need to get some momentum and some traction in terms of, I think Emily's point about, it's not in the agenda.
Yeah.
We need to pick that up. And I think as a group, we need to be more proactive in going out into schools. The difficulty that we've got is that we were able to go into Ralph Butterfield School because, their RE lead is a member of SACRE. So that was an easy in. And it was, we might easily get into other schools where, that they don't see it as because there's no threat. It's very positive. And I think there's probably a piece of work that needs to be done, and Maxine again probably would need to lead on this in terms of liaising with schools and heads, and particularly academies, which is very different from from your main kind of mainstream schools. So I think we need to really gain some momentum and some impetus moving forward. And I would encourage anybody on SACRE, if you haven't done a school visit, please sign up to the next one. Because it really is, it's positive in terms of understanding what good RE practice looks like, but that will then enable you when you go into a school to observe bad RE practice. Does that make sense? So yeah, so yeah, hopefully that's going to answer your question.
Yeah, no, it's been really comprehensive. Penny.
I was on that visit as well.
Thank you, Penny, forgive me. And yes, you right, you were. I knew there
Well done for nitpicking that. That's right.
Yeah, I knew there were. I couldn't think of Penny. Sorry, I remembered it was you. I thought it was Ben, but it wasn't. I kept looking across at Ben, thinking, is he going to know?
Any thoughts?
I'm not a teacher, but I was very, very impressed with the structure and the documentation and the way that everything was laid out. It was very, very impressive. So I think you're right in saying if you go to one school, and I don't know what a good teacher kind of syllabus looks like, if you know what I mean. But I would then be able to go to somewhere else and say, oh, okay, so that's what you have, a tiny folder and they had a really big folder, and you, by having those discussions, you get a feeling of how I talked to some of the children of how they liked RE in the school, just a bit like we did last night. I mean tonight, but not quite as long. But when you go in, you can just get a feel of the school, and the head was absolutely brilliant because she obviously supported the subject of RE in her school, and it was important, and was there at, took her time out of her day to talk to us. So I think there is great value in those visits, particularly those of us who aren't teachers.
I visited Butterfield before Christmas and thought it was generally an excellent school. It was a really, really good visit. Diane, did I see you wave?
I think it was half away. Just coming back to the comment that you made about some of the RE being mainly Christianity. We have syllabi that really schools should be following. I think that's a key role that we have as SACRE, isn't it? Just to try to make sure that different faiths are represented and represented well. And even with with C of E schools, they have a very strong, robust syllabus as well. So we should be seeing good schemes of learning across the board.
Okay. So here's my proposal, that I work with Maxine to organise, I'm going to be bold here, I'm going to say let's try and organise 2 primary school visits. And my suggestion would be that we organise one primary school visit to a school that is not religious in its description, and we organise one trip to visit to a school that potentially is religious. My suggestion would be C of E, just because there's probably the most of them. There's also Roman Catholic schools as well. As an outline, as a starting point, if we try and organise those two visits, then there's an opportunity for us to maybe think about what's going on in that different space. So I've made that proposal, so I've instantly now got people who want to shout me down, which is lovely. Go on.
No, I was just thinking, would it be best to wait for the results from the questionnaire? Because you'll find in secondary school particularly that there will be a lot of different ways that RE is kind of brought in the curriculum, the amount of time they've got and the exams that they do and things like this. So we can sort of have an overview and kind of go, well, actually, they look like they're robust, they know what they're doing. And then if you kind of go, well, actually, they have a lot less of it, then you know what you're comparing. Because the delivery is very, very different from school to school, I tend to find. That might be useful to just have that as a starting block and then target.
I think that's a lovely idea. And if what you're saying about Maxine's got the results in but needs to analyse them, then that feeds into what we're doing. Excellent. So
I'm aware this is slightly going back to the last agenda item, but it does say that Maxine would look at doing a task and finish group to look at the responses with her. So I just didn't want her to think that we were leaving her to it if she did want more of us to assist with it, or that was helpful.
Yeah, no, I think Maxine would welcome all of the support she could get. Dan, did you?
I was just going to say with my role with York St John, I've got some links with some of the schools in York, some of the high schools in York. So maybe I could get an in there.
That was going to be my next question. In my head, I thought in order to do a bit of a comparison, we'd look at two primary schools. But what do people think about that? I mean, would we like to look at a secondary school?
I think we should.
So now, yeah, Ben.
There's two jobs. I would start with primary if we've seen one. Then hopefully we can still do secondary before the end of the year. But
yeah,
there's no point in going and seeing one secondary and one primary if we're trying to do what you want us to do, which is see whether the listing is actually common across schools.
Yeah, that was my thought as well. Is actually do a bit of a sort of a scientific look at this and actually say, okay, well let's focus. We've done one primary school, so we know what we're doing with that. Let's stick with the primary school for now. However, if we get those two done, then your next step is to compare with secondary school, and actually, because we then have three schools that we could say, right, they're primary schools across the city. These are what we've thought about that. Let's now move into a secondary perspective and see what's changed between what's happened in a primary school setting to what then they see in a secondary school. People happy with that plan going forwards? I think if we can, that's, you know, even for us, that's mildly ambitious. So let's go with that and go from there. Okay. I hope you're writing all this down. Because we don't remember it.
It's recorded, Bob. You're okay.
Yes, of course. I'll spend all those hours reading it back. Excellent. Has anybody else got anything else to say about that item? I think we sort of went off that item slightly there, but that was item 4. Lovely. Item 5 is review of the SACRE development plan. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, me, Martin and Ben are going to start that RAG rating process, and we'll bring that back to the next meeting, at which point you can agree or disagree with sort of what we've put together as a starting place, and we can have a bit more of a full conversation about that then. So I'm going to move over to the next item, which is item 6, which is essentially the briefing paper that comes out from NASACRE, the National Association of Standing Advisory Councils on Religious Education. It's a cheap title, isn't it?
NASACRE.
NASACRE, yes. On the only things that I wanted to highlight in there is there are some offers of training. So, for example, on Wednesday, the 26th of June, this is on page 25. There is a webinar, I think it's called, is it a webinar? Yeah. A webinar about people who've joined SACRE, whether you've joined it on purpose or by accident. If you're new to it, that might be something that you'd like to go to. There are other webinars on there as well, if anyone's got any thoughts or feelings about anything that they want to go on. As we are members of SACRE, that it's part of the package, so I think you're entitled to go on those. If you do, please let us know as well, because I think it's really good to have a record of what training people have undertaken. So I think that'd be really, really valuable. Anybody want to point out anything particular on item 6?
I was just wondering about, there's an item about humanism and group A.
What page is that?
It's
Just so we're all again.
28.
28.
Oh, thank you. It's written in big letters at the top of it, and I struggled to find it.
It's all right.
But I think what it's referring to, as it outlines there, is this action that was taken because there was some problem with the humanist rep being involved in Kent SACRE. Now, luckily, York's not being like that. Traditionally, they, such as myself, have been welcomed onto SACRE. I'm just wondering whether, I don't think constitutionally it would have to be here. So whether it's something that we want to advise the local authority in terms of sort of making that a little bit more formal, really, and saying that even if it is just a statement that says, people of a non-religious worldview are welcomed onto the SACRE, to apply to be on the SACRE, and it just makes it then more in line with the latest legal position in terms of that. I don't know whether that's something, I don't feel strongly that it needs to be there because we've not, it's like addressing a problem we've not got. But just in terms of my quest of making, non-religious worldviews equitable with those of faith views, I think it's something that we could consider. Was there an agreement?
What do people think about that? I mean, personally, I have to say I don't have huge concerns about that. The reason I've turned to the front page of my agenda is to sort of look at the titles of the different groups to see how that fits. Anyone got any thoughts?
I was just going to say that when we are advertising the vacancies, which are now on the updated website, that we've got vacancies, but maybe saying that we would be open to other religions as well as non-religious views might make that really clear, that we're open to people approaching us to be on the SACRE rather than us. I think this specifically a Salvation Army and another vacancy. But having that line saying that we're open to approach might mean that other people felt that they could also ask to be part of it.
Yeah. If you look at the Group A definition on here, so such Christian denominations and other religious denominations as, in the opinion of the authority, will approximately reflect the principal religious traditions in the area. I almost think if there was a little bit on the end of that reflecting humanism as well, that would help as well, because I suppose that's
and really that broader view of non-religious worldview. I'm often conscious that humanism is not the only, just as faith groups have many different representatives. But I think that's that was essentially what caused the problem in Kent.
Yeah,
that led to all sorts of pleasantries that didn't really need to happen in my view. But and I don't, like you said, Bob, I don't have an issue as far as we're concerned. But as you mentioned, practically, I think it would help.
That might be a better way to do it. I'm going to go to Martin and then Ben.
Yeah, so I absolutely support and welcome you being on this group, and I think when Ian came, I was one of those members of SACRE who when Ian came and addressed us, I found it really, really helpful. And as a result of that, we invited Ian to take a position here on SACRE, and he's been brilliant in terms of what he contributes. And we did look at this prior to your appointment, and I think that the difficult. I'm happy for us to make it as broad as we can. And one of the reasons why we wanted to make it broad was because there was a survey done of religious beliefs in York a year or so ago, and Christianity for the first time, I think, was less than 50%. There was other faith groups that were much higher. And therefore, I think we felt as a SACRE that we wanted it to be open to as many representatives as we could of all faiths and none. And I think our application process, I think as Sarah mentioned, covers that. If you wanted to slip a few lines in there, you can do at the end of it, because Ian makes a very valid point, or made a very valid point when he addressed us, that actually there's a growing number of individuals that replied to any kind of survey that don't have a religious belief at all. They don't identify as humanist. They just don't have a religious belief. So yeah, maybe kind of all faiths and none. Would be a good idea.
Sorry to interrupt.
Ian, I'll come back to you in a minute, but I've got a few people
Yeah,
waiting
it was
first.
just to clarify really that it's not something we can do, as it says here. It's not something SACRE can do. It's whether we would recommend to the local authority.
Yeah.
Local authorities have that power and not us.
Yes,
So it's just to clarify that rather than interrupt you. Sorry.
Ben, and then after Derek.
But I'm just slightly confused by the wording here, because of course the wording now in curriculums talks about religious and belief traditions, and that seems to me to be a SACRE requirement. It's not to have lots of people who have no belief systems, because that's not the job reflected in the curriculum that we're trying to monitor. I don't know if we're able to put religious and belief traditions, in which case then humanist is clearly one. And that solves the problem, or whether this wording is dictated by legislation, but it seems out of place, given that that's what, unless I'm wrong, what the latest curriculum says. It always refers to religion belief.
Yeah,
looking at you, because I think you might know.
It's religions and worldviews is the recommendation from the core report. Excuse me now. And I was wondering about the word denomination there, and I'm going to ask the question about where does this language come from?
Oh, that's a great question. From my limited knowledge, is this, this piece, the reason SACRE exists is from the 1948 Education Act, which was essentially protecting the Church of England's view and authority, shall we say, within RE in schools.
Return a lot of cash.
Let's remain neutral about these things. I'm set in the middle, and I will tell you off. But anyway, but that is part of the reason, I think, because you'll see that in Group B there is a specific group for the Church of England, and that's where that's coming from. I actually think that religious tradition and world views, I think, is quite a nice way of doing that, and I think we link that with possibly looking at the website and maybe tweaking the word in there to support. I actually think that's a positive step forward, and Joker's just going to go and ruin it now. Go on.
No, I was going to say that much of the documents we get from the Church of England for teaching RE in the Church of England schools at the minute is talking about religious worldview, non-religious worldview, to the point where a lot of our documents and things we give to the children we're having to sort of change and make sure that they're aware that that's how we, as the Church of England, they use the royal we there, are expressing our faith and our understanding within schools, within communities. So potentially just using words like world faith, non-religious faith, non-religious worldview. These things are important because although, to somebody outside of these rooms, it might seem, well, almost petty, it isn't, because to people such as our friend Ian and others in the community, it can mean a real difference, especially when we're talking about a world where semantics does lead to persecution and difficulties.
Yes. Okay. Right. I think we narrowly avoided a massive argument there. I feel like we did anyway. I actually think that's been quite helpful though. So I think, Ian, do you think you raised this point first? Do you think that we've helped or hindered your?
We've certainly exercised our thoughts around it.
Yeah.
I'm not clear as to whether we're going to recommend to the local authority that the constitution is looked at to make the language more inclusive of other worldviews.
So on that particular point, I suppose my view would be, firstly, I'm the executive member for Children, Young People and Education. So in terms of recommending it to the authority, it's me. If we have to change the constitution to make the changes we've suggested, I don't have a problem with that. What I'm suggesting is we might not have to change the constitution in order to do that. I think particularly with a website, I think that will be fine. I think possibly with a change to the grouping name to include the things that Joseph suggested and about different worldviews, that might be a little bit tricky. But I'm happy to take that forward and make that suggestion if the rest of the group are happy for me to do that. Has anyone got any objections to doing that? Well, we'll do that then. Again, you'd better be writing this down. Yeah. Maxine's not here, so I'm just agreeing to everything. Right, okay. So that takes us nicely on to the next item, unless anybody else has got anything on the NASACRE. Oh, that's right. Oh, so close. Councillor.
Just a quick one. I was just looking at the awards for activities and events and things, and I was just thinking, have any thoughts of something we could do in York? I'm not after an award. I'm just thinking it made me think that we could be doing something, especially given the budget that we don't seem to have used in this budget in SACRE. So I was just wondering whether there was any opportunities to do on the back of the sort of thing we've done this evening, but on a bigger scale.
Yeah,
I think that'd be quite a nice thing to do.
It's a good question, actually. So my thoughts on that was, because I read it that way and I thought, well, actually, could we put ourselves forward for anything? I think at the moment, I'm not sure we could, but actually, I think with school visits, with wider engagement with the community, with taking our SACRE to different places and spaces, and as I know Ben spoke about previously about potentially building up a bigger reservoir of resources for teachers in schools. I think that could be something in the future that we might want to think about, but we probably need to do some work.
Oh yeah,
first.
not right now.
Yeah.
I haven't got quite enough on at the moment.
Yeah, that was my thought about that. I think it was quite an interesting point that there were things in there. I also thought that some of the things that had won awards were actually very similar to things that we've been thinking about in terms of linking RE teachers with communities and faith groups, things like that. And actually, I was thinking maybe we could do a bit of work to do a bit more in-depth research to see what they've done, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel and maybe we can just copy them. Diane.
Am I right in thinking that the West Hill Awards here that we could apply for, we apply for an award as a SACRE? Would it be that we can ask schools to apply to us and tell us what they've done that's good, and therefore we could then apply on their behalf? Because I think that would be a really good way of marketing us as a SACRE on a very positive note and getting the SACRE known better around schools. I would imagine that not a lot of heads of RE in primary schools would know what a SACRE is, let alone what we do. And it would just get the message out there in a positive way if there's an award to be had and some money to be had, and they've got a chance to showcase what they do, because there's a lot of good practice out there.
Yeah, I mean, it was it's a very similar vein, really, in that I think it's difficult for us as a SACRE to look at making awards because we don't have exposure to all the potential that's out there to go and to judge. But I think Diane's comment there about making this award process known to schools who then can, through us, make an application. So I would definitely endorse what Diane said. I think for us, we're just not in a position, because we don't have enough coverage for us to be able to say we think we should be awarding this. I think Diane's suggestion is far better.
Okay. So are people happy if I go away and do a bit of research about West I know everyone's always happy when I go away, but if we go in and look at what the Westfield Awards are, how they work, and then potentially if we can work to share that with schools, is that happy with that, Karen?
Yeah, schools do get, so I do get an email from them about what they do and what their kind of awards are for. So if I'm getting that in a Catholic school, I'm assuming that others like you guys might be getting it. So I wonder whether it is maybe out there in schools, but because it's not a
Yeah,
type thing, that it kind of goes under the radar.
yeah.
Time,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Taco, just either of you knew about this?
Not massively.
No?
Just me then.
It's not filtered.
It's all right. It's not special. I don't mind.
Can I just club? I think the bit that does seem to say that schools can engage, but also SACRE could submit on their own. So could we not sort of have some sort of interfaith project that we put together, like a youth SACRE, and apply it to that, and then we get the funding to be able to fund, like we had today, the kids coming in and talking, but actually them having their own SACRE, and we can then get from there, which can advise us further, and then we use that £4,000 to get that going, get that kick-started separately from the school.
Yeah, that's how I read it at
Yes.
first, was that sort of SACRE sort of.
They can also apply
Yeah.
as well as schools, I think that's what it seemed.
Okay.
I read it about 20 times just to make sure. And I'm still not sure.
Sarah,
Sounds really good.
yeah.
That's an idea. I really like that idea. I think it would be a really beneficial thing. It's a shame that we can't quite read the pages.
So the webinar on the 16th. We know the 16th of what?
We're 16th of October 2023.
He was that what it was? He's not.
Yeah, yeah, we'll send a link. Possibly it was online, on the online papers it was there. But yeah, that's something that I thought as well when I saw it. Okay, so there's two things there then. There's one, investigate sharing it more widely with schools to make them aware that they can apply themselves. And two, I do think developing the offer that we're looking to develop over this year, and then potentially look at whether we can win next year. Does that seem reasonable? And we're obviously going to win next year, so there you go. Get ready. More pizza. Okay. Anything else on that? Okay. Next item on the agenda is correspondence on complaints and determinations. There's no complaints apparently. You're all doing wonderful jobs. Thank you very much. So that then leads us on to the next item, which is any other business. And I have remembered that we said we'd talk just for 5-10 minutes or so about what we heard, what we thought about at the start of the meeting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of phrase it in two parts. The first part, I think, is what did people pick up from the young people, actually the parents as well, which was really helpful. What were the things that stuck in your mind? You thought that's really interesting. And then the second part that we'll move on to is what are we going to do as a result of it? Okay, so anybody want to start us off with things that they thought were useful? Ian?
I thought it was all really useful and very, very positive, and I thought the young people had some really interesting things to say that we need to listen to. I think on the point of engagement, one of the things I was a little bit concerned about, which is why I went back to it, is with the young man Sammy, who clearly it mattered a lot to him, his complaint, and I did feel we sort of listened to him and then moved on.
Yeah.
And I think when young people come, and it takes courage to say this upset me, it had done. It takes courage for a young person to do that in a forum like that. I think it's, up to us to make sure we listen to it, even though we might have concerns about it and our own thoughts about it, but just to sort of listen respectfully to it and respond in some way to what he had to say. I just felt like we sort of just moved on.
Yeah, but
Yeah, we've heard your complaint. Not even going to mention it or address it in any way whatsoever. We're going to talk about something else. So that I just think we need to be mindful of as a group, that we respond when points.
No, that's it's a fair point, Ian, and that was possibly my fault. I was just
I wasn't
trying
blaming
to,
anybody, you know, I think it's something we just as a group need to be.
possibly trying to get around the different people in the
Yeah.
room, but no,
Yeah.
it was a very specific thing as well.
It was,
that-
yeah, and it was
you're
difficult
right.
to know how to respond to it, but I think the onus is on us to respond, you know, in some way or another, but I certainly wasn't pointing a finger of blame at anybody in particular.
Yeah, the first student hasn't. We go to Ben, then I've got Diane, and then Darius. So Ben.
So there are three things that I took away that I'd like us to discuss, which in part is making something we do follow from Sam. Firstly, this issue about discussion versus examination. And I think that's a longer discussion, but I think that's one we should have and I'd like to have with some of the teachers. So that's for a future agenda. Secondly, to pick up on Stanley's point, should we or should there be some guidance on how school visits work? I've raised before my concern about another very well-funded Christian group that goes into schools and, as far as I understand, proselytizes, provides information. And it is very difficult, even when a group is not actually proselytizing. If that's the only group that you ever hear from, then that's a problem. And if it's on the basis that, frankly, they're the only group that can afford to go in because they employ full-time people whose job that is, then should we as a SACRE, particularly seeing that we didn't spend £2,000 of our budget last year, be thinking about how we can make it easier for other groups that depend on volunteers to go in and frankly provide worldviews which are more likely to be out with the skills and knowledge of the teachers in the building anyway. You know, it seems to me it's rather more important for them to hear from non-Christian voices from outside, because those are the voices. So there's a discussion there about whether there's anything we can do to support other voices coming into it. But, so three things: discussion-based examinations, guidance on whether it's appropriate to give out gifts and how it might work, and to have non-Christian voices.
Can I just come back again?
I'm gonna take my people in order, so you're on my list, brilliant. If we don't do it that way, we'll all
no
fight.
problem.
And I'm just writing my notes as I go. So the next person was Diane.
But the point I was going to make was that I had a chat with Sammy afterwards, and I said, do you have a student council? And are you on the student council? And it was last year, but it's not this year. So we'll go to student council and raise it there, because I'm sure there'll be other students that'd be interested to know about that. So that he's going to go in and do that. So he does feel as if he has a voice back in school. I think he's a little bit unsure about how to go about it. So that's hopefully facilitated that. But to come back to your point there, with people like, I think it's probably Gideon's who was talking about, going in, often that's a pastoral thing into a big assembly rather than to an RE lesson. There's two separate things here, because heads of RE often get visitors to come in as part of the RE curriculum, and there is usually a variety there. But I haven't ever come across any other organisation that gives gifts. And I think the issue from what Sam was saying that I gleaned from that, and I know I came in halfway through and I'm sorry about that, was that there didn't seem to be the element of choice, that they didn't have a real choice as to whether they took it or didn't take it. And I think that needs to be made clear, really, that somehow when you're an adult and in a position of power, it's different from when you're a student, and whether you can say yes or no and feel comfortable about it. And clearly he didn't feel comfortable either way, and I'm sure he probably wasn't the only one. And the other thing about guidance, there is some really good guidance on the NASACRE website for visitors, and speaking to visitors before they come, preparing the children before visitors come, and some really good resources on that as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
I've made note, Joseph. I'm going to go to Darius next.
2.1 about Sammy's complaint, whatever we have done tonight, in addition to that, I think he should receive a letter from us acknowledging his complaint and saying that
What we're going to do.
if we have decided what to do, then write to him. If not, just saying that we will in time let you know, something like that. So he's acknowledged formally.
Yeah.
I actually think it's quite a nice idea for all of the young people who came tonight to actually in some way thank them for coming along and share sort of a summary of what we've had and what we've thought about. So I'll write it. I'm giving myself another job, but I'll do that and share it around.
It is supplementary. I mean, I wasn't in that meeting because I had other things to do prior to the meeting here. I think a general letter to the young people is fine. I think if you as the chair specifically acknowledge an individual's comment, the difficulty is we have a complaints process. So it's just a bit of for me, it's just a slightly grey area. If in a conversation, a young person makes a comment or a complaint or whatever you want to define it as, there is a process. And if we're going to just respond because somebody makes a comment that we have a lot of sympathy with, does that undermine the complaints process? I'm just
No,
like that was my point.
I will come back on that.
I think acknowledging comments and acknowledging that an individual's comment has been taken on board, yeah, but so whilst I understand the reasoning behind Darren's suggestion, I'm just slightly cautious.
No, hang on.
Right.
Now, right, okay, so let's just fix on that, because I know another couple of people want to speak, I think, about that particular thing. So, Ian, did you want to speak about that, about Sammy's concerns about the?
No, it's just more in response to one of the points that.
Hold that thought then. Joseph, did you want to speak?
No, so also in response to that.
Hold that thought, but did anybody else want to speak about that one? I'll come back to you, Dariush. On that point, man, I think it's a good point actually. And so what I could do, and I think this might sort of solve it, is I'll write the letter saying thank you very much to all of the young people, but actually I will put a link into if you've got any thoughts or feelings, this is how that procedure works.
Yeah.
I think that'd be worth doing. And I will acknowledge thoughts that people have raised in general. I won't name any names and say Sammy said this and we thought that was great, but that's the thing that I think would work.
And so just for the colleagues, I chair the council's complaints standards committee process, so I'm quite adamant that the complaints process across the board is always upheld.
Right.
That's why I said it. Nothing personal.
Dariush.
He didn't say he was coming to make a comment. He started by saying, I have a complaint.
Yeah.
So it is definitely a statement of complaint.
Yeah.
It should be taken that. Now, if we have got the procedures, we can let him know or whatever.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, he should be thanked for his contribution.
100%. I think that was really important, the way he did raise that as well. This is a complaint, and we shouldn't forget it.
I'm just really aware we're using his name in a webcast.
That's true.
Sorry, just.
But not his.
No.
And it could be a pseudonym. Otherwise, no one else.
It's an important point, but thank you. Yes. Okay. I'm gonna, because we focused very heavily on that one issue, but there was lots of really other good stuff that came out of that. I'm now going to go to Ian's next on my list.
Yeah, just very briefly, just I agree with all the points that Ben made, but it's just a slight concern around the sort of using funding. I'm sure I misunderstood what you mean, but I don't think you meant we would use the money to help other people proselytise because they didn't have the same funds as.
No, I mean, the task of RE is information.
Information, yeah, and it was within that context that you were, just to clarify that.
Thank you. Okay, Jobs.
And just for the sake of making people aware of changes that have happened, the Gideons, not to be accused of nitpicking, have changed their name to Good News for Everyone. And part of their current mission is not to proselytise, but it is meant to be voluntary, that the children have the choice of taking or leaving the Bibles. I have a year 7 form, those are the kids that go to the assembly, those are the kids that were given the opportunity to take the Bibles. I had a Muslim kid take one and a vicar's son not take one. And I just think it's worth putting on record that, you know, if, for lack of anything, it's a tradition. I reckon everyone in here who went to a British secondary school probably did get the Bible and had to scroll the name in the front of it as well. But it's just worth noting that the community that gives towards that are not just Christian, it's mainly Christian for obvious reasons, but it's a wide diversity of denominations that give to that for a multitude of reasons.
Thank you. No, that's good. It's good to think about. Penny?
With reference to training and going into schools, Olivia Seymour, who used to sit on this committee, provides training. Dariush and I have done that. I can't remember exactly. It's on their platform, on the platform. So for Yorkshire, so if you haven't done it, you can go on a little training course, and you learn how to properly go into schools and visit. So you're and then you become a recognised person. You go on their website, so that there's some. So you can say to schools, "I've had some training in order to come into your school and do a presentation." So that's something.
Linking with the guidance.
Yes, worth considering. But in terms of faith, my faith is under a Christian banner, but my faith is different to the Catholic faith, my faith. So I think sometimes one of my issues is that all the Christian faiths get lumped together, and actually there's quite a diversity in belief within that Christian banner. So I think we do need to be careful that we don't just go, oh, you're all Christians and you all fall under this one banner, and we need to listen to everybody else, because there is a diversity, and that's something. And York Interfaith, which is a good way to help. We've helped schools. In fact, we're going into Waldgate. We've been into Archbishops and going into Waldgate soon, beginning of February. And we try and gather as many people as possible to go in, so that there is a variety of faiths, including a variety of Christian faiths.
Yeah.
So that everybody can understand that there's different aspects to a Christian faith, and I think that is something that's important as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure that non-Christian faiths would also say there's a lot of variation within their various religions as well.
Just a point on the youth that came today, and I think one of them raised a point about the errors that exist dominantly in. Of course, the Ibrahim who spoke up was speaking from an Islamic background, but he's a very strong personality. But then his sister, on the other hand, isn't. So I think she was telling you sometimes there's things that are being taught that aren't correct, and she didn't have enough courage to kind of speak out. And so it's like it could happen in classrooms, and it might not be addressed even if there are religious students in that classroom, and then all the children are being taught it, and they're taking it as, okay, well, this is exactly what this religion believes. So the reason I'm raising it is, how do we kind of address the errors? How do we rectify that sort of thing, especially if the teacher isn't a religious studies teacher and is just like a maths teacher who's taken on it because they've been given it by the school.
Yeah, I'm not sure you'd find many maths teachers who take on that challenge. But I suppose something that I'd say to that, I don't know what other people's thoughts are, is if we go back to the first thing I think Ben raised about the discussion versus examination. I think what a lot of the young people said tonight was actually they want more of an opportunity to discuss and explore their own faith, other people's faith, other people's worldviews, religious or non-religious. I actually think you probably find that those mistakes would be teased out through that process. And I don't know, the RE teachers think that makes sense. If there's anything you'd like to add to that, seem reasonable.
There's just not enough time.
Yeah.
There's just not enough time. I would love to do more discussion than examination, but there just is not enough time. There is too much to fit in examination wise than to have those discussions. And it's really sad because they want, you know, students want to have those discussions. They want to be able to iron things out. And those from different faith backgrounds in our school are generally happy to share when things aren't quite right, but there just isn't time.
Well, yeah.
I was gonna,
Sorry.
no, I'm gonna second you with that, absolutely right. I think the powers that be that overlook when they come and look at books and what kind of the evidence for what happens in your classroom. And if there is not a page written for every single lesson, then it's what are you teaching them? There's no evidence then. So if it's discussion based, you know, as a teacher, you can do so many things. We had one student, actually, I think it was a Muslim student as well. We were talking about prayer, and he sort of said, "Oh, can I show you what we do?" And I was like, "Brilliant!" And we got a prayer mat, and he showed us exactly, showed us all the words the students were following, copying, or if they didn't want it, they just sort of sat and listened. And they had a great time, really listening, really understanding what was going on and how much it meant to this young lad. But they didn't write anything in the books, and I was so conscious of that at the end of it, I was like, "Okay, let's just do a bit of reflective writing, 10 minutes to say what you thought about this, just to make sure there was something written." And that's powers that be. That's Ofsted. That's Michael Gove.
Yeah.
Sorry. Don't forget that.
We're not swearing in here. Thank you very much. One thing, sorry. All worldviews are accepted. One thing that really shocked me actually was when I think it was Ibrahim who said it was the curriculum that was wrong, which, you know, that, and I don't know if that is true. I can't obviously comment on that. I wouldn't know myself. But if there are things that young people are telling us, actually, that's just plain wrong, and that's part of a national curriculum, then surely part of our duty is to at least write to the DFE and say, hang on, think about this. This can't be right. And I think if we can unpick, and if members of different communities and different faiths hear from young people that is an issue, please let us know. And then I'm happy to sort of feed that up, if you see what I mean. If that's clearly an issue, it surprised me that that's something that happens.
Just following that from that again, I know exam boards, when they're writing their books and their questions and things, that it's often a teacher that would do that, or not necessarily somebody from a faith who is a teacher. And I know, you know, I spoke to one lady who taught in Wigan, and she was not of Jewish faith, and she was employed to write the textbook on the Jewish faith, and she was not from Jewish faith. She knew about it, and she'd studied it. So see, that depth might not always be there from the exam boards, but in the books and the syllabus out there. Mm-hmm. So maybe they need to look about faith advisors in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think we just need to be a bit cautious of York SACRE writing to the DFE.
I agree.
I think it's the school. We can write to the school and say, young person, without naming, has raised this issue. Can you look into it? I think we're on fairly difficult ground if we start writing to the DFE telling them there's mistakes in their curriculum. I don't know. I'm just erring on the side of caution.
You don't have to listen to it. But
I think so.
I'm going to go to Ben now. Ben.
So two things. I mean, I hear what the imam says. I think the only way that you address that is going to be to have more outside speakers come in who actually, frankly, know what they're speaking about, and that's the bit that we can deliver. I do absolutely understand what I'm hearing from the teachers about the lack of time, although I'm rather shocked by the need for the evidence of every single session in that way. I think my question back would be where the kids are doing short course RE, or where they're being required to do RE because they're in a school that teaches RE right through to 16, even though that's not really a course they're choosing, whether the time is well spent in putting them into an exam and therefore having to teach to that exam, or whether the time in that situation is better off saying, right, we don't do exams, and then we've got a bit more freedom.
It's a question that is asked by teachers up and down the land, I imagine, about what we do with time in schools and how much focus there is on exams.
But RE is slightly different because we sometimes have compulsory, it's the only subject in which we have compulsory lessons that they happen to choose at that stage and made it.
Martin, you
Yeah, very, very quickly. It was really just to agree with Emily. I think the difficulty is that when, you know, when we engage with young people, which we absolutely should do, and actually, Bob, nobody engages with them more than you and your teacher colleagues. If you engage with them, those that teach full time every day. I think where something is mentioned to us. So as a school governor at Archbishop Aldgate School, when I go in there, if a young person said something to me which I thought was of some concern, I wouldn't immediately flash off a letter, you know, as the local councillor to the DFE, irrespective of which party was in control. I'd go to the head teacher. There are processes that we need to take. I think if we hear anecdotal evidence from our visits, we really need to channel that through the head teacher so that he or she can then investigate that and see if there's any credence behind it. And if there is, to take any necessary action. And they may want to report back to the SACRE and say, as a result of that, we've discovered this. So thank you for letting us know. I just think there's a process that we have, you know.
No, so point taken. Imam, you were next.
Yeah, just talking about the errors, I think Ben spoke about how important school visits are. Usually whenever I go into a school, especially at high school, I end up giving the assembly, and then the RE's teachers will come and say, okay, well, we had this question and we didn't know the answer, and we had this question and we didn't know the answer. Of course, they had the luxury to ask someone of the faith, and I can't go into every school, or as someone of like a particular faith, can't go into every school. So school visits are very, very helpful. So in terms of guidance, can we potentially say, if you do have any issues with the curriculum or anything like that, maybe call your local faith, like someone who represents that faith, and then you can get like direct guidance on that particular matter or on that issue, and then it can be solved as quickly as possible.
I think that's a really valid point. I think something that we could take forward. Next, I had Diane and then Penny.
SACRE have like a little directory of, you know, contact details for each. So the schools could each have a little directory, and then they could just refer to it and just either email or call somebody.
So that's something we're looking to spend
our budget on.
Something we're looking to build up over this year. Yeah, exactly that, because I think that will be something that hopefully would be quite helpful for everybody. Diane.
I was just going to come back at what you said, Ben, about discussion versus exam RE. One of the issues with going down the route of just being able to do discussion and no exam at all is that then it can be less valued by the pupils, by the students. And if you have got a short course, at least they come out with something at the end of the course that they have to do anyway. And you do have more time, I think, when you haven't got the pressure of a full course sometimes. And there's always some space for some discussion, but maybe not as much as you would possibly like. I've never had a problem not being able to have any discussions in my classroom, but you have to balance that against the requirements of the exam as well. If you take everything away, then I found that the pupils don't value it as much.
I'm going to give Penny the last word. Since this is your building, last word. Go.
Thank you very much. I was just going to say, with reference to correcting errors, that really we should also be encouraging parents to address errors with the schools directly. I had a problem with one of my sons at a school in York, I won't name it, and I addressed that issue as his mother, as a parent, and I wrote a very detailed letter because they were teaching incorrect things about my faith. They were teaching, one particular teacher was teaching that it was a cult. So I addressed that issue and I demonstrated that we were very much part of the community, and I sat on SACRE and I'm part of Interfaith and we do all sorts of things. And do you know what I mean? To say, well, actually, we're the total opposite of the way you've taught what my faith is, and that it's a cult. So as a parent, I addressed that issue, and the school were good about it, and addressed it. So I took that up.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, as in our communities, I think it would be good to encourage parents to address any misunderstandings directly.
Yeah.
You know, as a parent to the school. It didn't go any further. I didn't make a complaint to SACRE. I addressed it directly with the school and it was resolved and I received an apology. So I think that's a good way of approaching misunderstandings.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Penny. I think involving parents in something like this is really important. Okay. I did say we'd have two parts. One was what did you think about what that meeting, and that's generated a bit of discussion there. It was really nice. The second part was what do we do next? Now, my view is, firstly, we've had a few actions. So one about letters to the young people themselves, to thank them. On that note, I don't have the contact details for any of those young people, but if members of the community can email them to me, then I will make sure that I can action that point. That'd be helpful.
With their permission, Chair, because of GDPR.
Yes.
It might be, sorry, Chair, but it might be better if you did that letter and then sent it to the group to distribute them. So, is where I'm coming from.
That's fine. We'll do it that way. That's
probably it'll be administratively for you as well.
Yeah, no, that perfect. Thank you. That's a good idea. Next, what I'm intending to do is just write up a little bit about what you've all said in this part here, just to sort of summarize that. And then as an item on the next agenda, we have a discussion about anything that we've come up with from this, anything we think we want to action further, and any next steps based on that. Does that sound a reasonable way forward? If we're happy with that? Lovely. Okay. Right. The only other thing is the future meetings. So the next meeting we have scheduled in is the 19th of March at 6 p.m. It says West office is there, although I'm happy to go anywhere else in York if people want to do that. Thank you again, Penny. You weren't in the room when I thanked you earlier, but for organising tonight, it's been great. I do feel if we were going to go out in branch out to the community again, I think it's a good idea to go to a different venue so that we're moving around the city.
Yeah.
You don't all have to shout now if you've got any suggestions as to where we should go next, but you will need to tell me pretty quickly so I can organise that. So does anybody have any suggestions right now? I thought. So please email me if you do have any thoughts and feelings about where you'd like to go next. Otherwise, if we hear nothing, we will go to West offices for our next meeting. Okay. That's it. Thanks, folks. Nice night.